be a forever drug for individuals or what?
That is still the question. Like, we do know that when people go off of the drugs, they tend to gain the weight back, but not everyone does. Like, I've talked to patients who have gained a little bit of weight back, but not all of it, or they haven't gained any weight back, and because they've been extremely diligent about their behaviors after going off of the drugs. And so that's still something that doctors are trying to figure out, and the pharmaceutical companies also are trying to make, longer lasting drugs.
Okay, there's a lot we want to talk to you about, and we only have a few minutes left. So I want to touch on the story that you recently wrote about Eli Lilly spending some serious money to help increase the supply of its weight loss drug. What's the latest from Indiana?
Yeah, so Dave Ricks, the CEO of Eli Lilly, announced this morning that Lilly was investing another $5.3 billion to expand this manufacturing plant in Indiana. That's going to make the active ingredients that are, used to make Mounjaro and Zepbound, the diabetes drug and the weight loss drug, which is, they said it's like the biggest manufacturing investment in the company's history, and they're an 150-year-old company, so that's
a lot.
Pretty big. And they've already invested, I think, another 3.7-ish or 3.1 billion into this facility. So there's a lot of money going into this site in Indiana that's going to make different elements of the weight loss drugs, but it'll still take a couple of years for this site to actually start producing for the market, which is the issue. They can pour as much cash as they want into ramping up production all over the world, but it takes about 3 to 4 years from the time of the announcement for those sites to actually start making the drugs. So it's still going to be a little while before the supply situation gets better.
Well, I'm looking at, this is a company that's expected to have like 43 billion in revenue this year. It was 36 billion last year. So the ramp up, and I'm sure this is a big part of the play.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I look at these stories that you guys put out and that you put out, that Bloomberg Intelligence estimates that this could be an $80 billion market by 2030. We talk about billion-dollar drugs, right, that everybody aspires to. This is just kind of unbelievable and off the chart. One story, you want to go there?
Yeah.
Hims and Hers. Can we talk about that? So what do we need to know about what they are doing?
Well, we wanted to know about the compounding pharmacies specifically, and like how they're able to do it and what the risks associated with that are.
This is such an interesting area because it's really like compounding pharmacies have always been around. We use them, if someone has an allergy to a certain dye in a medication, you can go to a compounding pharmacy and they can make the drug for you without that dye. Like, that's sort of the purpose.
Right.
They're also supposed to help during drug shortages, but they're not supposed to be like drug manufacturers making drugs at the scale that the pharmaceutical companies do, because the FDA doesn't approve these drugs in the same way that it does generics or branded medications. So there's this little loophole that kind of is allowing these compounding pharmacies to do this, which is the fact that the drug shortages are so bad for Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, like across the board, all of these weight loss and diabetes drugs are in shortage. So the compounding pharmacies are allowed to do this, but it's happening at such a large scale right now, and there really isn't a good idea of how big this market is because no one's tracking it. The FDA doesn't really track it. State health departments, pharmacy boards aren't tracking it. But I know from talking to patients, doctors, even the pharmaceutical companies themselves, that just so many people are turning towards these compounded drugs now.
But is there oversight? We've only got about 20 seconds. Are
really.
the compounds safe?
That is sort of the question. Like, it's happening at a scale that if they were unsafe, we would probably be hearing about issues, which is a little bit reassuring. But Lilly and Novo have tested the drugs and said that in some cases it's no more than sugar water, or they're, contain impurities that are would not actually put them in the same category as the drugs. Like, they're different drugs. So it's a gamble what you're getting.
So you think you're getting X and you're actually getting Y.
And I've talked to doctors who say their patients get like a bag of syringes instead of the actual pen that's used. So it's just a very different game.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Bloomberg News health reporter Madison Mueller. She is on this beat in a big way.
Hey, coming up next, record travel season. We're going to get the details from Hopper. First up, though, a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 9 Hour Newsroom. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. President Biden say he might have a new way
All
to
right,
help
I'm gonna try a
neutralize
different
attacks
IB.
from the right about his age. A Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll finds nearly half of swing state voters, 48%, say they trust Vice President Kamala Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if Biden were no longer able to serve. The poll finds Donald Trump leads President Biden 48 to 44% across the 7 swing states. They're tied in Nevada. But the poll also shows Harris as the top choice among those considered Democratic rising stars if Biden were unable to continue his campaign. The top United Nations court has ordered Israel to immediately halt its military operations in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, but stopped short of ordering a full ceasefire. ICJ President Nawaf Salam.
Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction.
The International Court of Justice judgments are binding with no right of appeal, but it has no mechanism to enforce any order. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
6:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We are on track for a fifth week of gains on the S&P 500 index, up right now 37 points higher, 53.05. That is an advance of 0.7%. Going to be very interesting to see where the S&P closes today, where things shake out. Got to keep it locked in Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, and we'll let you know what's going on. But right now, 53.05, we're higher by 0.7%. Dow Industrials up 50 right now, up by 0.1%. NASDAQ up 184, pushing higher by 1.1%. That 10-year 4.46% with a 2-year that's yielding 4.94%. Gold up $7 the ounce, 23.36, up by 0.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1.4%, 77.91 a barrel on crude as we kick off the summer driving season. Bitcoin up 1.8%. Keeping an eye on Workday shares after earnings, dropping the most in more than 4 years. Workday right now plunging 15.2%. Also after earnings, we heard from Intuit last night. Intuit now lower by 8%. Again, recapping, stocks are higher. S&P 53.04, up by 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks for the update. Well, the Bloomberg Big Take yesterday, you might recall, it was about summer airline travel, how it will be busy and kind of messy. Travelers are and have been hitting the skies ahead of the Memorial Day weekend in what is expected to be the busiest one in over a decade, and that's ahead of a record year for summer travel. That's the forecast, Tim.
Well, with some of the trends she is seeing and how to make it what is expected to be a busy and messy summer travel season, how to make it a little less messy and maybe a little less expensive, we have with us Haley Berg. She's back with us from Boston. She's lead economist over at Hopper. Haley, good to have you with us. I'm wondering if you're also seeing the messiness in the data that you have at Hopper, because we had this great Bloomberg Big Take yesterday. The aviation team here at Bloomberg News, they took data from Cirium and they found that especially in the South and in Florida, we're seeing a lot of reduction this summer when it comes to airline seats. And what that means is, well, it's going to be more busy on those routes. And I'm wondering what you're seeing in your data over at Hopper.
You know, overall, we're seeing an expansion in capacity, about 1 million more seats departing over Memorial Day weekend, for example. But you're right, there's still optimization happening, which means that some of these routes do have fewer seats. The good news is that in terms of disruption, those things out of passengers' control on departure, we are seeing lower rates than we've seen in previous summers. But they do skyrocket by about 60% in the summer months because it's so busy. So you have to go into travel this summer prepared for disruption, but it won't be quite as bad as what we've seen before.
Prepare for destruction?
Disruption.
Oh, disruption.
Disruption.
Or
I am wondering where you're seeing the expansion, what routes specifically, and where consumers can expect to see more flights.
We're continuing to see a lot of expansion transatlantic, especially at this time of the year when a lot of travelers are taking those longer bucket list trips, vacations while kids are out of school. But we're also seeing expansion on some of the most popular routes in the U.S., destinations that, you know, the largest volume of travelers are interested in going. So those are going to be hub to hub, things like New York City to West Coast, or those Midwest, Central, Chicago, Minneapolis.
You know, Carol and I were trying to get back from California a few weeks ago. And yes, we bought tickets a little late, and there was nothing left in terms of seats. It was pretty wild to see coming out of San Francisco and the Bay Area, trying to get back to New York. I mean, there were very few flights and there were no seats left. I'm wondering if that's something where we're going to see expansion.
One of the biggest ways airlines have managed their capacity the last couple of years coming out of COVID is by adding fewer planes, but increasing the number of seats on those planes. So swapping out a smaller jet for a larger one and flying less frequently. So I'm not surprised that you might have seen fewer options than you might be used to. But then those load factors, the number of people booking tickets, are going up because it's so busy. So I'm not surprised. I will say West Coast hubs to New York City in particular are always busy and always expensive. So probably some luck of the draw there too.
what are we seeing when it comes to pricing? And I'm curious, first of all, with airline pricing, you talked a little bit about it. Really, are prices coming down at all? Or how much?
They are. On domestic routes, they are down. Take Memorial Day weekend, for example, average fares are down almost 10% year over year. So huge improvement. Travelers this long weekend paid around $300 a ticket. International routes, it's a mixed bag. Europe is seeing a lot of price improvement. Prices are down about 10% from last year, but still about 10% higher than pre-pandemic. And Asia is expensive as ever, still about 30 to 60%
Wait,
more expensive.
When
than
you say
pre-pandemic.
Asia, what's the hot spot? Where's everybody going in Asia?
I'm guessing Japan.
Japan.
Oh, I was right.
We've seen almost double the share of searches to Japan from the U.S.
We're all raising our hands on air because one of our producers just went to
Exactly.
Japan.
That's what I was thinking. Sebastian.
I think it was. Oh yeah, no, but Elizabeth.
Oh yeah, also
Right?
Elizabeth. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's going to Japan.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Haley.
Japan is the place to be. Increasing demand. It's where a lot of the international capacity has come back the most. It's one of the most searched for destinations for summer. Airfare will cost you about $1,400 though, so it's an expensive trip.
Wow.
That's in the back of the plane too, Carol.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Hotel prices. Now, Tim and I, too, we had a work trip. We were in San Francisco. Mind you, there was a big conference going on.
Yeah, it
so
was
they were
during the RSA conference, which is like just takes over the entire city.
So getting a hotel room, we were just lucky. And it was in actually a very nice place. But it was, I don't even want to say it on air, super expensive. Just there for one night because we had to do, we were doing a live broadcast. What's going on with hotel pricing?
Hotel prices are still higher than they were pre-pandemic, but they have not continued to increase over the last 2-3 years. So there was a big bump up when people started doing staycations after COVID. So prices are flat relative to last year and the year before, but the burn in the wallet is definitely a little bit greater. This long weekend, about $215 per night. Summer prices on average are about the same. But if you're going to hotspots like New York City, Miami, Las Vegas, you'll be paying significantly more than that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about some travel tips and when people can get the cheapest flights, because that's the bread and butter for you guys over at Hopper. You take all this data, you analyze it, and you try to come up with actionable things that your customers can do to find the best and cheapest flights. So when should we be buying tickets?
If you're taking a domestic trip this summer, 1 to 3 months in advance is going to be the sweet spot. So think about it this way. If you're taking a trip in June or July and you haven't booked your airfare yet, you should be booking it now. If you're traveling later in August, early September, which is a pro tip, airfare will be cheaper in those months, then you have maybe a few more weeks. But those international trips, if you have not booked them yet, book them now. Prices for summer are already higher than the rest of the year, and you're running a little bit late. So book those international summer trips now.
I have to say, I had to bring, my daughter's coming home from London, and I kind of waited, of course, late on everything. It was expensive. It's a combination of cash and miles, but I was like, and it's just one way.
Wasn't pretty?
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. It's a good thing I love her.
She's worth it.
It's a good thing I love her because we're going to bring her home.
And is September domestic? We're not too late? Asking
You're
for
not
myself?
too late for September.
Okay.
And here's the real big money saving tip.
Tim's got
Whether
some
you're
plans.
whether you're going international or domestic, if possible, travel in September instead of June, July, or August. Not only will there be fewer people on your plane, fewer tourists, you will save about 30% on your airfare and hotel stays. So it pays to push off your vacation.
And it does also pay to take the first flight of the day. I think about that a lot for work or for play.
Do it all the time.
I want to be there early. I want to get out before either delays. That does make sense. Just got about 20 seconds left here. It's smart to do that.
Yeah. If you depart after 8 or 10 a.m., you're 2 times more likely to be delayed or canceled on departure. You're likely to get stuck in long security lines. Take the first flight of the day whenever possible and increase your chances of getting onto your destination on time.
Now, if you're Charlie Pellet, you actually want to be delayed or kicked to another flight or be offered up a ticket because he is known for doing
Get that $1,200, airline credit.
Exactly.
If you've got time, it's a great way to get a little extra travel budget.
He builds it in. He builds it in sometimes like an extra day, so he has that option. Haley, thank you so much. Have a great long holiday weekend. Haley Berg, lead economist over at Hopper from Boston.
You know who told me a few years ago to do the early flight? Paul Sweeney was
Did he
like,
really?
always take the first flight out.
I always
And
think about
I started to do that. He's right.
like you don't get traffic to the airport. You just get there and you just
And then
go.
you get to your destination early. You can have a full day.
It's a good piece of advice. All right, coming up next, everybody, the TikTok video poking fun at you finance bros. This is Bloomberg.
It's 2:53 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Right now, though, a look at company news. And Lucid Group is going to eliminate about 400 jobs in coming months. The latest move by an EV maker to cut costs in a dramatically slowing market for plug-in cars. We've got shares of Lucid down 0.7% on an update for the rest of the market. Tesla advancing 3.3%. Rivian, among other EV makers, Rivian right now higher by 4%. According to a regulatory filing, the reductions, which amount to about 6% of the automaker's workforce, will be completed by the end of the third quarter. To put all of this in context, the layoffs underscore the challenges for EV makers to scale production while adapting to an environment of waning consumer demand for battery-powered vehicles. Sources say Alphabet's Google will invest about $350 million in Flipkart, an Indian online retailer controlled by Walmart. The investment part of an approximately $1 billion funding round that began late last year. Google's investment was first reported by the Economic Times newspaper. Alphabet shares up by 0.9%. Speaking of Walmart, Capital One Financial will no longer be the exclusive issuer of Walmart credit cards after Walmart succeeded in a lawsuit regarding the relationship. Novo Nordisk's blockbuster diabetes drug Ozempic cut patients' risk of dying in a kidney disease study, the latest research pointing to the medicine's usefulness in a constellation of disorders. Scientists announced the findings in the New England Journal of Medicine. Shares of Novo today, they're up now by about 0.5%. And those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellett, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. That's Carol Masser. I'm Tim Stenivek. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 991 Newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Vice President Kamala Harris increasingly endearing herself to swing state voters. That just might help President Biden with Republican attacks regarding his age. A Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll finds nearly half of swing state voters, 48%, say they trust Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if Biden were no longer able to serve. The poll finds Donald Trump leads President Biden 48 to 44% across the 7 swing states, but they're tied in Nevada. Uvalde, Texas is marking the 2-year anniversary of the mass school shooting that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Last September, President Biden created the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, overseen by Vice President Harris. President Biden also marked today's anniversary with a letter to the community saying more needs to be done to prevent gun violence and mass shootings. Documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock, an Oscar nominee who made food in American diets his life's work and famously ate only at McDonald's for a whole month to illustrate the dangers of a fast food diet, has died. You might remember he made a splash in 2004 with that groundbreaking film, Supersize Me.
I think I'm going to have to go supersize.
It seems like you're starting to get addicted to it now. Unfortunately, you caused some major harm to your heart, your liver, your blood.
Morgan Spurlock died of cancer. He was 53 years old. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and back to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek.
All right, Amy, thank you so much. Amy Morris there. All right, folks, let's get to our one more thing. A 19-second TikTok video poking fun at old stereotypes, finding some new popularity online. This has to do with finance folks.
Finance folks, okay. She goes by Girl on Couch on social media. Her name
Not
is...
on a couch or the couch.
No, Girl on Couch.
Girl on Couch.
Megan Boney is her name. She posted at the end of April singing about looking for a man in finance. Since then, her video has gotten more than 2 million views. It's also sparked thousands of riffs and recreations. I actually haven't seen the original one. I've seen the remixes, Carol.
There's been a lot.
In fact, Brooklyn Mirage, this famous hipster rave institution, streamed this, or they danced to it at the Brooklyn Mirage, and it's been streamed over 300,000 times on Spotify.
Yeah, the remix is mostly in the financial younglings' favorite music genre, electronic. Lots of memes across social media.
Don't dismiss it. Come on.
I'm not. What's interesting is Megan Boney said she hopes that the finance bros are not too mad at me. That's a quote. She goes on to say, I was making fun of girls who are single and complain about being single, but have this long list of things that a man should have. She is 27. She's based in Manhattan. She says she's also single, so she's making fun of herself as well. But you know what it is. It's like, I need to find someone, but they have to be, 6'2", blonde, blue eyes, successful, career in this, and you go through this laundry list. And so I think she's kind of making fun of them.
What do you think? Is it going to be the
It's okay
song
to
of the
have
summer?
lists. It's
Is it
okay
gonna be
to
the
have a
song of the
list,
summer?
I don't know. I don't know.
We'll find out at the end of the summer, I guess,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Liquidity, the Instagram account with close to 900,000 followers, called it the official Finance Summer 2024 anthem.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're just having some fun, but it is we'll see how it makes the rounds.
I'm going to have that song stuck in my head the whole time now.
All right, everybody. For those watching on television, the close is coming your way in just a moment. For those staying with Tim and me on Bloomberg Business Week, we'll continue on radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. And coming up over the next couple of hours, we're going to get into an interesting story on the Bloomberg. It has to do with SpaceX and evaluation, Tim.
Also, some big news in the crypto world with the SEC paving the way for the eventual launch of the first U.S. ETFs that invest directly in Ether. So there's another rally around the corner when it comes to at least this crypto.
Could be, or is, I guess, right? At least initially.
Maybe. We'll see.
Favorite guest, Sal Khan of Khan Academy, is going to be with us. His next challenge, he's talking AI and education. That's coming up. He's got a new book on it. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, we're just about 1 hour away from the closing bell, getting ready to wrap up the Friday trade ahead of the long holiday weekend, and also, of course, wrap up the trading week. We've got stocks actually off their lows of this session, so a little bit of a rally in both the S&P and the NASDAQ. Call it flat, though, on the Dow Jones Industrial Average.
Hey, we got a great program coming up this hour. As we just mentioned, SpaceX, it's a private company, but a new share sale could give it a valuation that would make it more valuable than 450 companies in the S&P 500. We're going to give you the details on that in just a few minutes.
All right, also big news in the crypto world, as we talked about earlier, the SEC paving the way for the eventual launch of the first U.S. ETFs that invest directly in Ether. So, as Tim was mentioning, could a rally be around the corner?
All right, we'll talk to our guest about that. Also, Carol, if you, in the last 15 years, were in high school, maybe even in middle school.
Of course I was.
Graduate school, college, then you know the voice of this guy, Sal Khan. Every student in the last 20 years knows who this guy is because they've turned to his YouTube videos and Khan Academy for some help with everything from finance to chemistry to physics to art.
I think it's safe to say he was way ahead of his time. Did a piece on him years ago, like when he was just starting out.
So cool.
It's really cool. So I'm looking forward to, I know you are looking forward to having him back and just talking about kind of the role of AI. He's actually positive about it, so really interesting. So lots to come over the next couple of hours.
Hey, first up, let's get a check of the day's trade and top business stories. Here's Charlie Bella.
I thank you very much. If you're watching the screens, and yes, I know you are, we got the S&P 500 index right now, 5,300 even. A point I've been raising. Are we going to close above or below that level? We move into the final hour of trading ahead of a long holiday weekend. 53.00 and a decimal there, up 0.6%. The Dow, since our last update, now in the red. Dow Industrials moving lower, down 2 points right now, down less than 0.1%. 58 minutes to go until that closing bell clangs on Wall Street. Going to be very interesting to see things how things shake out ahead of a long holiday weekend. Do you want exposure? We got NASDAQ right now up 166, higher by 1%. 10-year yield 4.46%. The 2-year 4.94%. Spot gold up 0.2%. 23.34 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.1%. 77.71 for a barrel of WTI. Bottom line, S&P is higher. Natty Lovell is senior equity strategist at UBS Financial Services. She told us she does see this rally broadening.
At the end of the day, we have a market that's up 6% since late April, and nearly every sector is in the green. But overall, we do think that the macro backdrop does remain supportive for equities, and so we would expect this rally to continue to broaden out.
Nadia Lovell of UBS, all of a sudden another leg lower for the Dow, now down by 29 points. Keeping an eye on Workday shares after earnings. They're dropping the most in more than 4 years. Workday now down 15.7%. Intuit after earnings down 8.4%. Again, though, the big news, Dow just turning negative here in the final hour of trading. Recapping, S&P up 0.5%, higher now by 27 points. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Well, SpaceX has initiated discussions about selling existing shares at a price that could value the company at roughly $200 billion. This is according to people familiar with the matter. Carol, that's up from the most recent tender offer just a few months ago. The news story by our Bloomberg team back in December of 2023, so just a few months ago. That tender offer gave it a valuation of $180 billion. So, okay, context about this, right? Who cares, you know?
Bounces around.
Yeah, $200 billion, that valuation. It's a private company, remember? But it would make SpaceX more valuable than all but 48 companies in the S&P 500, meaning it's more valuable than Verizon, McDonald's, Walt Disney, Applied Materials, and more.
Context means everything. Right?
Context changes everything.
That's so true. All right, Bruce Einhorn, we want to know more, though. Bruce Einhorn is Bloomberg News enterprise reporter. He is joining us from New Jersey. Hey, Bruce, good to have you here with us. Happy Friday. So what's going on? And I'm just curious about how the world is thinking about what really is the valuation of SpaceX specifically.
Well, as you already mentioned, this is a tender offer that would be going to select investors as well as employees. Elon Musk did post something on X saying that, we, SpaceX, do liquidity rounds for employees and investors every approximately 6 months. So this would be consistent with the schedule because the last one was in December, right? So that was 180 billion. This would be 200 billion. It is an indication, again, of just how successful SpaceX has been in really establishing itself as the leader in this nascent industry. There are a lot of other companies out there that launch satellites. There are companies out there that want to operate communication networks from low Earth orbit, but nobody approaches SpaceX in terms of its scale.
Bruce, what do we know about SpaceX's business? Because I know Elon Musk has talked about the market for satellite launches is a little, it's limited in the sense of who the customers are. Not everybody is going to send a satellite up. Enter Starlink, the SpaceX business that provides internet to people in places where it's hard to get internet, maybe boats, for example, or in parts of the world that don't have the infrastructure, RVs and more. What do we know about SpaceX's business and sort of the breakdown about what's valued and where the growth is?
Well, up until now, the business has largely been about launching satellites, and they've been very successful in that. SpaceX doesn't have a monopoly when it comes to launching satellites. There are some other companies out there, but nobody launches as frequently as SpaceX does.
It is
and some of its major competitors have really had problems in getting their next generation rockets ready. There's the European company, Ariane Group. They have the Ariane 6 rocket that's years behind schedule. They may be having their first launch next month or early July, but years behind. Similar situation with the H3 rocket from Japan, which is developed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. So the major rivals are just not there. So SpaceX really has dominated this market when it comes to satellite launches. But Musk and others do see that the future is going to be more about providing service from space. And again, SpaceX has a big lead there. So there are other companies, most notably Amazon, that want to operate networks from low Earth orbit, but they're just getting started. SpaceX has, last I checked, well over 5,600. I think they're closing in on 6,000 satellites, and they keep launching more.
Yeah, and there was, a story. It's funny. I think Tesla was one of my gainers. Was it yesterday or earlier in the week? And SpaceX had posted, I believe on X, first video call on X completed through Starlink, direct-to-cell satellites from unmodified mobile phones. We're excited to go live with T-Mobile later this year. And I just wonder, kind of growth paths, growth avenues. I mean, are we thinking that eventually Starlink or SpaceX, they're going to be, our cell carrier?
Maybe, but it's not a great business being in the mobile communications business, right?
Because you got to deal with people like us.
And the terminals, the dishes that currently are required for most reception of Starlink service, those are expensive, and the company probably loses money on each one, according to what we at Bloomberg have reported previously. They are looking for ways around that by going direct to devices, and so that could eliminate that cost. You mentioned boats earlier. That is something that they do have a lead in, right? Because there are a lot of shipping companies, say, that want to be able to have internet access for their oil tankers or their container ships while they're out at sea. And previously, it's been really expensive. You can get access via satellites that are much higher in space, in geosynchronous orbit. But that's really expensive service, and you don't get a lot of bandwidth for that. So those companies are really keen on switching to Starlink. And so there are niche cases like that. But whether you and I are going to want to use Starlink for our cell phone service while we're just here on dry land, that remains to be seen.
Bruce, I'm wondering about the path forward for this company, because a $200 billion privately held company, there aren't that many of those because oftentimes they become public companies before they reach that market cap. SpaceX is a little different, though, because so much of it relies on government contracts. Yes, we just spent a lot of time talking about Starlink and the opportunities with Starlink. What do you know? What do we know? What has our Bloomberg team learned about the path forward for this company as a private versus public entity?
We at Bloomberg have reported previously that the company was considering an IPO as early as 2024. Nothing yet indicating just what the timetable will be on that. So that's something that we still need to look for. Meanwhile, there is news from SpaceX today. The company did post something on X saying that they're looking for the next launch of Starship, which is their giant next generation rocket. And they're saying that the fourth test launch of that could be as early as June 5th, pending regulatory approval.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Interesting story, certainly a lot to think about. The universe of Elon, but to SpaceX specifically. Hey, Bruce Einhorn, thank you so much. Bruce Einhorn is Bloomberg News enterprise reporter joining us in New Jersey. Do you want to mention a couple of headlines crossing the Bloomberg terminal? Blackstone founder and CEO Steve Schwarzman is endorsing Donald Trump. This is coming from Axios doing the reporting, also noting that Schwarzman plans to donate to Donald Trump and Republican candidates. Again, the source on this is Axios. So just a few headlines crossing as we see different individuals and certainly within the wealthy financial sector starting to kind of line up against, not against, but behind different candidates.
Another headline, too, completely unrelated. Stericycle said to waste sale after getting takeover interest, so another redhead crossing the Bloomberg. The day before Memorial Day weekend, Carol, and there's some news happening.
Yeah, I got to say, it's a day that, as we've been going through the news, it's a little quiet in the office, certainly quiet in the city. Things have definitely slowed down ahead of the holiday weekend. It did make us all kind of stop for a moment and think for a little bit about where we were just about 4 years ago, Tim, living amid the pandemic and the shutdown. It's hard to remember how far away that is. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday, but there was a lot going on 4 years ago.
Yeah, more specifically tomorrow, it will be 4 years since a Minneapolis police officer killed George Floyd. That murder prompted outrage across the U.S. We saw protests, we saw political promises. We also saw talk from corporate America. They pledged $12 billion in financial commitments to address racial inequality and another $80 billion to support minority suppliers. This is according to Bloomberg surveys in 2020 and 2021. So 4 years later, what's happened? What's changed? What have companies done? It's something that Bloomberg News Equality team reporter Simone Foxman has been looking into. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. A lot has happened in the 4 years. When Carol and I were sitting here about 3 years ago, I'd say it was the peak of companies talking about who they're hiring, where the money's going. And then just in recent months, we've spoken to you a lot about the backlash over DEI initiatives and essentially how it's turned into a four-letter word.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happened. If you look just at the earnings call mentions of things like diversity and DEI, they actually doubled after the murder of George Floyd in about mid-2022. And since then, they've now returned back to 2019 levels. And, while companies tell us, and we ask them constantly, are you pulling back on your DEI initiatives? They say, no, we're still committed to diversity. Some of them have changed DEI to something else, inclusiveness, belonging, allyship. The message they say is we're still on this, but we're not hearing them trumpet that anymore. I think that's the overall message, or very few of them, I should say, are out there with this message.
I always feel like, Simone, we're such a data-driven company. So what do the numbers tell us? Because we've talked a little bit about the venture world and entrepreneurs that, once again, Black entrepreneurs are not getting the money and it's difficult at banks. But what are we seeing maybe on the labor front? Are we seeing hirings? What are we seeing?
Yeah, interesting you point to that number. 1.4% of all the assets under management in the asset management industry are controlled by both people of color and women,
it's really
according
small.
to the Knight Foundation. Yeah, I mean, in the workforce, if you look at the share of Black people in management roles, for example, we have seen an increase. 7.8% in 2019, now 9.9% 9.2%. Remember, black people make up about 13% of the U.S. workforce. This has more broadly been reflected by the employment numbers in people of color. Jeff Green, one of my colleagues, led this enormous investigation into how corporate America had been hiring. While we don't know the most recent data, the 2022-2023, in 2021, it did appear that of the net 323,000 workers that were added to the workforce in that year, 94% were people of color.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. I think the question is, has that continued? That was a long time ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, we just don't get this data. It's called EO1 data. We don't get it very much, and so it makes it very hard for us to evaluate how corporate America is hiring.
It's a shame because companies know, right? They know who's on their employee, like they know their payrolls, their labor, like their labor force. They have a lot of data. They know it. It's a shame we don't
Tell
have it.
regulators. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
What does it feel like to you, though, as somebody who covers this so closely, looks at the data? We talk a lot about a return to the mean or reversion to the mean when it comes to stuff pre-pandemic. Are we back to just where we were pre-pandemic? Not necessarily with the hiring, but with company commitments to this stuff.
I don't think so. I think things have changed ultimately, and within companies, in part to draw a younger workforce. They just feel they need to have a little bit more sensibility towards things like diversity and inclusiveness. What's also changing right now, and what I've heard from everyone from Wall Street to across the executive landscape, is a desire to reframe this narrative, not as we want to rectify historical wrongs, and of course that's still important to people of color, but more, will we see return on investment when we bring more voices into the room, when we invest in underserved communities, and that is why we think DEI, or whatever it's going to be called, should live on.
McKinsey has been saying this forever, and I feel like it's interesting, whether it's the board, whether it's the employee base, that you want to have diversity.
But the challenge is some of the statistics that they point to aren't the best ways of reflecting these things. So, for example, McKinsey had these studies that came out, and they pointed to earnings benefit and financial performance of companies that were more diverse.
Right.
But it's the stock market, or it's company earnings, and this isn't always a great way of assessing actual innovation within companies. And frankly, even some of the folks who are the anti-DEI, trying to eliminate DEI departments on campus, DEI litmus tests, all of those things, they want, frankly, some of them want more diversity in the boardroom. They want more voices in the room. They will agree with that. They just think the methods of achieving that are wrong. What we really don't see, frankly, is a dialogue between the more centrist folks who believe that maybe DEI has overstepped to some degree, and the ones who are like anti-DEI. There's just no dialogue there.
Yeah, wow. Interesting, because it's 4 years, and you see how the evolution of the conversation, but it has moved the needle a little bit on the labor force.
It has.
But we're waiting for some more recent data to see if that's continued, so that's a big thing.
Our thanks to Bloomberg News Equality Team Leader Simone Foxman. Check out all of her reporting and her team's reporting at Bloomberg.com. Up next, we talk crypto. This is Bloomberg.
on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got 39 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell and on to the weekend, a long holiday weekend for a lot of people. Dow right now in the red. Dow Jones Industrial Average down by 9 points, a drop right now of less than 0.1%. S&P up 31, higher by 0.6%. NASDAQ up 165, up by 1%. 10-year, 4.46%, with a 2-year, 4.94%. Spot gold up 0.1%, 23.32 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.1%, 77.72 for a barrel of WTI. Stocks climbed after data showed American consumers tempered inflation expectations, bolstering sentiment regarding prospects for Fed rate cuts this year. But what about the broader economic backdrop? Kathy Bostancic is chief economist at Nationwide Mutual Insurance.
We are seeing some moderation in economic activity. Right now, it's just the first step, and there's a long ways to go in terms of economic activity and also inflation. But we're still hopeful that we do get, some further drop in inflation, particularly we think rental inflation.
Bostancic was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television. Novo Nordisk's blockbuster diabetes drug Ozempic cut patients' risk of dying in a kidney disease study. Shares of Novo Nordisk, the ADR, is up now by about 0.4%. And Eli Lilly is going to spend $5.3 billion to boost production of a key ingredient in its weight loss and diabetes shots. Shares of Lilly today, right now we have got shares of Lilly trading higher, little change right now. Again, recapping, S&P up 31, up 0.6%. Bitcoin today, Bitcoin right now up 1.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, speaking of Bitcoin, thank you, Charlie Pellet. Big news in the crypto world yesterday. The industry closer to another landmark after the SEC paved the way for the eventual launch of the first U.S. ETFs that invest directly in Ether. The SEC signed off on Thursday on a proposal by venues run by Cboe Global Markets, NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, to list products tied to the second biggest digital asset. So the big question that I have, Carol, is will it unleash a rally in Ether similar to the one we saw in Bitcoin after the spot ETFs started trading?
All right, well, let's see what our guest has to say about that. Steve McClurg is with us, head of U.S. Asset Management at the Digital Asset Alternatives Manager CoinShares. He's back with us from Nashville, Tennessee. Stephen, hope you're well. Good to have you back with us. So Ether ETF, are you anticipating that we'll see some kind of pop as a result?
Yeah, hi, Carol and Tim. Thanks so much for having me back. It looks like we've already seen the pop from the news. I do expect a pop in Ether and other cryptocurrencies, as well as Bitcoin, just due to the cycle that we're in. We just had the Bitcoin halving, and I do expect Bitcoin prices to triple over the next 18 months after that halving, and other currencies tend to follow closely.
Triple? You expect Bitcoin prices to triple over the next year? 18 months, I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the next 18 months, yeah.
Why?
That's a lot.
Why?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Well, we're just seeing the beginnings of funds flowing into the Bitcoin spot ETF. We didn't get the big wall of money. I mean, there was a lot. It was the biggest ETF launch of all time across 10 different ETFs, but it wasn't a massive wall of money of everybody that was ready to come in. A lot of financial advisors, insurance companies, even pension funds are looking at investing in Bitcoin in various ways, and they want to wait and do a certain amount of due diligence on the ETF, on the currency itself, and on managers over the next 2 to 3 years.
But
so
can I ask you, so is the tripling, is it just because if you see a lot of demand and there's more money all of a sudden coming in, is it just supply demand, and that means people are trading in and out of it, and that's why the price goes up so much? It's because there is a limited amount, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a limited amount of Bitcoin, and the rewards from mining have actually been cut in half just in the last month. So that means that less Bitcoin is available to come into the market. So that demand is high where supply has gotten very low.
So it's just a trade, and people buying it, selling it, and that's what keeps the price going up, correct?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. So
Well,
it's
to
kinda
that-
like a toy. That's what it sounds like.
Look, I'm going to build on what you just said, Carol, to ask my next question, because critics out there still say that even Bitcoin, which is the biggest cryptocurrency out there, it doesn't have any fundamental underlying value. There's always this joke about cash flows and lack of cash flows because it doesn't have cash flows. But it also, unlike gold, isn't used in jewelry or in circuitry, so there's no utility there. What would you say to critics who say this is still pure speculation and it has no place in my portfolio?
Yeah, money has always had value based on what people have assigned to it. So even gold, very little of the actual gold supply is used for things like jewelry and circuitry. Most of it is used as money and has been since, the history of the world.
But wait, is it
Same
really
with the
money?
US dollar.
You say it's money, but you really can't transact with it easily.
In a lot of places.
Yeah, it's not
Not
broadly
anymore.
accepted. No. Come on.
It's not El Salvador.
Yeah, and even that's limited.
Yeah, no, I mean you are seeing more transactions, and again, even from the monetary side, it's things have value based on what people put into it. So dollars, for instance, nothing's backing the dollar; it's just a bunch of paper with.
But the U.S. government, is backing the dollar.
Yeah.
And how do they back the? How does the U.S. government back the dollar?
Well, they used to use gold. They don't use
behind.
that anymore because we're not on a gold standard. But the U.S. government stands behind. It's the official currency of the United States.
Yeah, but what's given the dollar value in the last 50 years is the fact that other governments have given it value, and it's very quickly losing even that value as well. So
okay, but to look at it from a different perspective, to Carol's point, when I walk into a Sweetgreen, for example, to buy a salad, the price is given to me in dollars. It's not given to me in Bitcoin at this point.
Well, yeah, and that's absolutely right. And by the way, there's hundreds of currencies across the globe, most of them issued by countries. But Bitcoin has become a standard for inter-country exchange. Whether and it's slow and it's very small right now. But the speculation today is that in the future, a decade from now, it will be, and it will be a currency that's used by other people. So again, I agree with the argument that it's not heavily used as a currency today. But the speculation is that it will be more so in the future. It is used to a certain extent today, but as it grows as a global currency, it's going to have a lot more value.
What are you hearing? You have a great background. You were formerly a strategist over at Guggenheim Securities. You've looked at the markets more broadly. You've looked at what investors are interested in. I'm getting ready to do something with the folks over at BNY Mellon, their Insight event, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of assets, alt assets, including crypto in a portfolio. A lot of this stuff gains traction when investors are interested in. And you talk about the doubling or tripling of Bitcoin because of that investor interest. I mean, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? Who specifically, in terms of the institutional investors that increasingly are interested in the crypto space?
Yeah, and by the way, I'll see you at Insight. It's in Nashville this year. So,
cool.
One of my favorite events for the last probably 15 years. But and you said it. I come from more the boring bond side of the business. Managing bond portfolios. And I really look at crypto in a lot of the same ways that I used to look at bonds. I focus more on the asset-backed security side of things. But the interest right now really comes in no different than in 2008, 2009, when there was a big move to put gold in portfolios because there was this fear of inflation coming with all of the money printing. And that fear continues. Inflation is high. I just saw, data today showing, that in the last, just in the last 2 years, food costs have gone up 20%, energy costs have gone up 25%. And people are looking for places to hold value that isn't in dollars, that isn't in currencies that can be printed into inflation. So a lot of the demand actually comes in, whether it's anti-inflationary, or it's demand due to the fact that there's a belief that in the future it will hold more value and be more readily utilized.
It's interesting. Hey, Stephen, I want to go back to the Ether ETFs here because that was the big news yesterday. And if we do end up seeing them, it's by no means a sure thing at this point. It's not 100% guaranteed. If we do end up seeing them, I'm wondering where that fits into a person's portfolio since there already is access to digital assets when it comes to the spot Bitcoin ETFs. Is there enough room for the second largest digital currency?
Yeah, I think right now people are making bets that, okay, as a global currency, Bitcoin is probably the winner, and that's where a lot of demand is coming from, from the wirehouses and institutional investors. They've looked at Bitcoin, they've thought about it, they've said, okay, this is a currency, more of an outward currency, whereas ETH is actually more of a currency within the Ethereum blockchain. And one of the really important things about Ethereum is that the way that network works is if you hold those digital tokens, you can actually stake it back to the network and do things like vote and participate in the network and earn a total return. So when I think about Ethereum, I think about the total return of the opportunity, not just the price appreciation. The problem with the Ethereum ETF is that it's not allowing for staking rewards.
Right.
So a lot of people that already own ETH, so a lot of people that already own Bitcoin move their assets into the Bitcoin spot ETF.
Right.
But people that own ETH are earning 3.5% on their ETH.
Steve,
they're not going to move it into an ETF.
Steve, we got to wrap. Have a great weekend. Thanks for spending some time with us. Stephen McClurg, he's head of U.S. Asset Management over at CoinShares.
Hey, let's get a check on world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. A new poll finds Vice President Kamala Harris is garnering more support among swing state voters. It's something that could help President Biden withstand more attacks from the GOP about his age. The Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll shows Harris as the top choice among those considered Democratic rising stars if President Biden were unable to continue his campaign. And while Biden does trail Donald Trump by 4% in swing states, nearly half of swing state voters say they trust Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if Biden were no longer able to serve. Donald Trump suggested to News 12 in New York that Nikki Haley will be on his team if he wins the White House. He mentioned this after a rally yesterday. He'd offer her a position.
Well, I think she's going to be on our team because we have a lot of the same ideas, the same thoughts. I appreciated what she said. We had a nasty campaign. It was pretty nasty. But she's a very capable person, and I'm sure she's going to be on our team in some form.
After a bitter campaign during which Haley called Trump unhinged and not fit to be president, Haley this week told the conservative think tank the Hudson Institute that she would be voting for Trump. And Axios is now reporting Blackstone CEO Steve Schwarzman will support and donate to Donald Trump in the 2024 election. As the summer travel season kicks off this weekend, airlines are balancing consumer demand with ongoing fleet challenges. A Bloomberg analysis finds U.S. airlines adding seats at the slowest pace since the pandemic. Helene Becker with TD Cowen says, expect long lines and plan for weather.
And I see this every summer because of thunderstorms and because you never really know when they're going to pop up. If you can take the earliest flight of the day, that is your best bet.
Helene Becker with TD Cowen. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and we have got just 20 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. We've got the Dow swinging between gains and losses, getting choppy for the Dow, but the S&P on track for a gain today. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Shai. The Dow is quiet while the NASDAQ is outperforming. The Dow is currently up 12 points. S&Ps are higher by 0.7%, and the NASDAQ is higher by 1.1%. The U.S. 10-year yield at 4.47%. Gold is higher by 3. Oil trading in the green. And Bitcoin, that's higher by 1.8%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were telecom and utilities. Only energy and healthcare were in the red. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Intel and Apple, while Salesforce and J&J were under pressure. After earnings, Intuit fell 8.6%. Workday plunged 15%. And in deal news, Stericycle is set to weigh a sale after getting takeover interest. In other news, Google is going to invest in Walmart-owned Flipkart. And wrapping things up, NVIDIA hit a new all-time high, gaining 2.2%. Live from the First Word breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. Have a great weekend. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
You drive till you crazy.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 18 minutes left in today's trading session. The one and only Bill Maloney just giving a rundown of the markets
man.
along with Charlie.
The myth.
NVIDIA,
The
though,
legend.
another all-time high today.
Yeah, post earnings.
Post earnings.
Incredible.
Yeah, exactly, right? It continues. The overall market trade, though, as we were just all hearing from the team, flat on the Dow, just up about 0.6% on the S&P, and the NASDAQ 100 up almost 1%. But I'm looking at the numbers overall for the past 5 days. We might see a gain in the NASDAQ.
I want to go back to Jensen Huang at NVIDIA. He's now the 17th wealthiest person in the world with a net worth of $91.3 billion. Yesterday, he surpassed all members of the Walton family, the heirs to the Walmart fortune. Together, the Walton
Climbing
family
that
is still
list.
wealthier.
Yeah.
However, as individuals, they're not. This according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. It's remarkable stuff.
NVIDIA up almost 15% for the week overall. So, yeah, it's been a banner week, certainly for him and anybody who's been a bull on that name. And it seems like there's a ton of you out there. Let's get to it. Let's see what Nancy Pryl has to say. It is time for our Drive to the Close guest. She is Co-Chief Executive Officer and Senior Portfolio Manager at Essex Investment Management. She joins us from Chicago. Nancy, good to have you here with us. There's NVIDIA and then there's the market, it feels like. But how do you see it and how have you been thinking about it?
Yeah, that is very much how we see it. Obviously, a lot of attention focused on AI. And really very narrowly AI. And, certainly, NVIDIA's results were just spectacular. And they certainly have some great growth prospects. But it's not just NVIDIA. And we have to step back and remember, one, the path of disruptive technology and what generally happens right now. We've had what they call the innovation trigger. And we're getting into the excitement, higher expectations. Eventually, we'll end up at the peak of high expectations, and then we'll see how fast things deploy. And what we're seeing as a result, though, of all of this excitement over NVIDIA and AI, or I should say AI and then NVIDIA, is that other parts of the market are being crowded out. And we think that is a shame. There are so many really, really tremendous growth opportunities in the market.
Right.
Whether there's some of the more obvious ones, like the backdoor play on data centers with industrials, plays on the reshoring and manufacturing, or less obvious ones like all of the innovation that's going on in healthcare. We think investors should start looking there for the newer opportunities.
Well, let's go into it because your specialty and your portfolio manager for the micro small and some of the growth strategies within that world. And just to be fair, let me just look up. You've got the S&P 500 up about 11% so far this year. You've got same story for about the NASDAQ 100, almost 12%. If I pull up small caps as measured by the Russell 2000, and you're looking at a gain of not even 2%. So definitely we know they've been the underperformers here. So when you go into the small cap space, tell us what you find industry. I know you shared with our team some of the names that you like. Montrose Environmental, ticker's MEG. It's about a $1.3 billion market cap. Walk us through the investment scenario for that one.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we really like the industrials area. It's a big weighting in our portfolios. We think there are a lot of tailwinds behind these industrial companies. We particularly like companies that are focused on environmental remediation. And that's what Montrose Environmental is about. One of their areas of specialty is remediation for forever chemicals, what's called PFAS, PFAS. That is benefiting not only from some increased realization of the dangers of these PFAS in all of our drinking water supplies, but also some help from government that's funding the remediation work that needs to take care of it. So we like MEG Montrose in that space. We also like a somewhat larger cap company, Clean Harbors, CLH, that's also a player in that space.
Yeah, they're about an $11.5 billion company.
Can I ask you, Montrose is up about almost 50% this year. You think that there's more room to run here?
We do. I mean, the valuation is reasonable. It's not dirt cheap anymore, but it's reasonable. It's about 18 times EBITDA. Growth rates are accelerating. They're beating, they're raising numbers. And this PFAS remediation is just beginning. This is a multi-year cycle. I mean, every water system in this country is impacted by these. And they're very bad for people's health. And so they're going to have to relay pipes. They're going to have to, again, they're going to have to do water treatment. There's a lot of work that's going to be done to clean up this problem.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about quite a bit on our program, and it's incredibly disturbing to, in recent years, find out about all this.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
Right. I mean, I think the municipalities have known for a long time.
Good point. Okay, let's talk about some.
Well, that's reassuring.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's move on.
To be continued.
To be continued. I do want to talk about some of the other companies that you have in your list in the small caps because, like Carol said, not household names, not companies we talk about, and like you said, it's more than just NVIDIA out there.
Right. Is there one in particular you'd like?
Yeah, I want to talk about Patrick Industries.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Patrick Industries is one of our favorite names in the portfolio. They are an Indiana-based company. They participate in a number of end markets. So they make components to go into these end markets. And their main end markets today are manufactured housing, recreational vehicles, and boats, motorboats, motor yachts. And then they've just recently got into some of these smaller sports equipments like ski-doos and snowmobiles and ATVs. They are a combination of organic growth as well as growth by acquisition. So they are consolidating a business that has a lot of small players. It's a company with just an incredibly solid management team, off the beaten track. But what we see year in and year out is they gain content. So even as we go through cycles in their end markets, they gain content consistently. Margins have been improving. The balance sheet keeps improving. Stock is very inexpensively valued at about 11 times earnings that are not peak earnings. So we think that this stock has a lot of room to run, if I could use that expression with this. The other thing is, if you think about what some of the well-known speakers are saying about what's going to happen to the work week over the next period of time with the advent of AI, certainly Jamie Dimon has posited that we may be on a 4-day work week. If that's true, people will spend more time on leisure activities, and they'll be buying the toys that Patrick supplies into.
Okay, so if we're not working on Fridays, we're going boating. We're going water skiing.
Exactly.
Who was it that talked about, was it Ken Griffin or golf clubs? No, who was it?
Oh, Mets owner. Was it the Mets owner? Cohen.
Cohen. That's right. Yeah. Steve Cohen, right, about
right.
thinking about people. Thank you, Paul Brennan, our producer.
Thanks, Paul.
That idea of like investing in those areas because people are going to have like extra free time because they won't be at the office so much.
You know what? It's Friday afternoon, the Friday before Memorial Day.
Tim's here. I'm here. My team's there.
Nancy's there.
Have a good weekend.
Yep.
Nancy Pryl, Co-Chief Executive Officer, Senior Portfolio Manager at Essex Investment Management there in Chicago. All right, we're coming up on 10 minutes left in today's trading session, getting ready to wrap up the Friday trade.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Look now at company news, and Lucid Group is going to be eliminating about 400 jobs in coming months. The latest move by an EV maker to cut costs in a dramatically slowing market for plug-in cars. Now, according to a regulatory filing, the reductions, which amount to about 6% of the automaker's workforce, will be complete by the end of the third quarter. We've got Lucid up 1.5%, Tesla up by 3.1%, Rivian up now by about 4.4%. Sources tell Bloomberg Elon Musk's SpaceX has initiated discussions about selling existing shares at a price that could value the closely held company at roughly $200 billion. So why is Elon Musk doing it now? More from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in London.
Well, he's saying, look, this is an opportunity, of course, for existing investors and their employees, rewarding them, essentially, for holding on and being part of that ecosystem. So it does happen, he says, about every 6 months, and indeed we've got evidence of that. It happened about 6 months ago, but $180 billion was the valuation then. This time they're looking at selling, or at least the tender of shares of between $108 and $110 per share. So yes, it's a way to incentivize, of course, existing investors who want to maybe exit or at least capitalize on some of this upside that's come through, and employees.
Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie. Workday shares down the most in more than 4 years after the software company last night cut its full-year forecast for subscription revenue and said customers are being more cautious with orders. Subscription revenue, a key metric for Workday, which provides software for business tasks such as managing personnel. Workday shares down now by 15.5%. Also after earnings, Intuit lower now by 8.2%. And those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pelletan. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, just under 5 minutes left in today's trading session, so getting ready to wrap up the Friday trade ahead of the long weekend. We're all a little punchy, wrapping up the week overall, which has been a funny week if you think about what we had. Fed minutes, we had NVIDIA earnings, we had some kind of back and forth, if you will, in terms of expectations about what the Fed might do, and that's played out in the trade based on Fed minutes, based on economic data points. What else?
Did you say NVIDIA?
I'm so glad you listened to me.
I'm busy, Carol.
You're being funny. You're being funny. Yeah, NVIDIA. By the way, check out our weekend show because we've got a little bit of a different take on NVIDIA, but you do have some on the earnings, and then we talk a little bit about the AI PC that is everybody's agog over. But it might take some time.
Our analyst over at Bloomberg Intelligence says the AI phone from Apple is going to be here before an AI PC.
You know what we're not agog over?
What?
Congestion pricing.
Depends on who you speak to.
That's very true. If John Tucker was here, he would be like, no.
There are a lot of people who are really supportive of it, and there are a lot of folks who think it's not good.
I kind of think it might be a good idea.
The folks who are supportive of it are folks who don't drive into the city.
Yeah.
The folks who are not supportive of it are folks who drive into the city.
Yeah, I think there's particulars, and you do have to be worried about the costs that it might be kind of heaped on some individuals as a result of it. But having said that, there is someone indeed who has already voted, hint, hint, when it comes to congestion pricing.
That's none other than former President Donald Trump, who says in a post on Truth Social that if he's elected, he will terminate Manhattan's congestion pricing in his first week in office. He said it is a, quote, disaster for New York City.
Ring! You know who that is?
Who?
That's the mayor of New York City calling. Or the governor.
I was going to say, is it the mayor or the governor?
Or the governor.
Somebody
working out my politics here.
Well, no, I think the mayor. Well, it is the MTA. That's the thing.
Yeah.
The
so
state
that's
runs.
actually
The state runs the MTA.
So it's Governor Hochul.
And what is she saying on the phone?
Hi, Mr. President.
Or maybe Mr. President.
Or Mr. President. Or, you can't do that.
Is that so?
I don't know.
Does
the MTA get money from the federal government?
I don't know. I don't know how it works. I don't know if the president actually has that jurisdiction.
And no offense, raising hands. I think there's some more important pressing issues that might need to be dealt with.
Carol Messer.
But that's just somebody's perspective,
her hot take.
not mine.
not her hot take.
Do not go anywhere beyond the bell, starting right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Alex Steele. We're counting you down to the closing bell. And here to help take us beyond the bell, it's our global simulcast with Scarlett Fu in the television studio, Tim Stenevec and Carol Masser in the radio booth, as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, as well as those folks watching us on YouTube. Carol, how are you?
I am well. It's Friday, a long weekend. It's gorgeous outside. What could go wrong?
We're inside, not outside.
That was weird.
Wow,
A lot of things, I guess.
We got another hour of the program. There's a lot that can go on between now and then. You know what I'm surprised about?
I meant it to be optimistic in some way, but it didn't come across.
There's some optimism in the markets today. I mean, look at the NASDAQ composite, up more than 1% right now. It turns out some people are at their desks trading today.
Or they just put in their orders and they left for the day. The
Is that how
data
it
coming
works?
in from University of
You can do
Michigan.
that?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Well, or you can let the robots take over. The UMich data came in better than expected, particularly with the inflation expectations moderating. So that gave a boost to those who are looking for, once again, the Fed to cut rates sometime this year.
Yeah, I have to say, I've struggled to find what's going to be the next direction for markets at this point. Like, I know we have Jobs Friday, but that's not until June 7th. So what are we going to do the next couple weeks? I realize there's some economic indicators next week, second quarter read of GDP, for example. We also have PCE, but really, guys, come on. Like, what's
I'm
really
counting
gonna
down
wind up
to the
moving it?
blackout period.
Yeah, we know. The
Yeah,
blackout
Carol.
with no Fed talks doesn't mean the grid's going down.
I don't see the countdown clock's not on screen yet.
All right, well, we're almost there, Tim Senevic here. I mean, it's kind of interesting, too, the complexion, because we came into this week with the big expectation this would be a big week for tech, and I guess technically it was. That is the leading sector on a weekly basis, but we should point out the majority of the sectors on a weekly basis are in the red. As for the day, you actually got some green across the screen despite the oscillations that we've had all day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now straddling the line between gains and losses. It's up about 4 points right now, but of course it takes a while for these numbers to settle. They're still going to be down on a weekly basis. The S&P 500 up about 37 points or 0.7%. That's only going to again give it to about break even on a weekly basis, but the NASDAQ Composite doing what it does best, up 185 points or more than 1% on the day, up on the week as well, while the Russell 2000 is going to close out the day higher by 21 points or 1%.
All right, that's the small caps. Back to the big caps I go. S&P 500, definitely a positive tilt to the index. 355 names, Scarlett, actually gaining some ground today. 147 to the downside and 1 unchanged.
All right, let's look at the sectors. And no surprise there, given the numbers you just detailed, that you have a lot of green there. Communication services and tech, the biggest sectors in the S&P 500. They've each gained 1%. The NASDAQ 100, NASDAQ Composite closing at record highs. Utilities also right up there, gaining almost 1%. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the next hour, but it goes back to what Alex Steele was saying about how they are driving and they're benefiting, I should say, from the demand for power to fuel all these AI data centers. Healthcare, REITs, and energy are the laggards on the day.
Data centers, energy, right? The new AI play. All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if I may. Ross Stores, we were breaking down the earnings yesterday after the closing bell. At its highs, up about 10% today, finishing the day with just shy of an 8% gain. Discount retailer boosted its EPS forecast for the year. The company reported first quarter results, as well as we mentioned, with analysts noting that comp sales were roughly in line with expectations. This was your #1 gainer in the NASDAQ 100, #4 gainer in the S&P 500. All right, another retailer, BJ's Wholesale, finishing just shy of its highs of the session, but still up almost 6% for the Friday trade. Analysts raising their price target since the company reported earnings on May 23rd. It reported yesterday before the open, but the momentum, I should say, to the upside kind of continuing into today's session. The retailer reported adjusted earnings per share, revenue, and membership fee income for the first quarter that topped analyst expectations. UBS raising the price target on it to a street high of $97 a share from $89, and the stock finishing at 88 and change today. And then another one, we've all seen the commercials. I'm assuming we've all seen them. Guardant Health rallying after the company's Shield blood test to screen for colorectal cancer received the backing of an FDA advisory panel. This stock up at its highs about 17%, but still a really respectable gain, up more than 13% for the Friday trade.
I don't think I have seen those commercials.
You haven't seen them?
But now apparently
it's like the little box, the blue and white box that just tells you like a different way to test for it.
No, but thanks for saying that.
You're welcome.
All right, I want to go to some of the decliners. In the S&P 500, had my eye on what happened to Intuit today, down more than 8%. This after the company reported losing 1 million customers who use its TurboTax software for free. That highlighted concerns about demand for the company's software. Shares fell more than 8% today. 10 million people used TurboTax for free this year to file their taxes. It's about a drop of 1 million from a year ago. Also, Workday shares dropping the most in more than, going all the way back to 2016 at this point. This after the company cut its full-year forecast for subscription revenue and said customers were being more cautious with orders. Shares today fell by more than 15%. And then Summit Therapeutics lost nearly a quarter of its value today. This after the company reported data from a trial of a lung cancer drug with partner Akeso. That data was seen as disappointing. I should note the data abstract of the drug was released by the American Society of Clinical Oncology. It's only the worst day going on back to February, so it's been a pretty volatile stock. Back then, just a few months ago, it fell 26%. Akeso shares, for its part, fell by a record, Alex, in Hong Kong after the abstract release.
All right, well, the Treasury market closed at 2 p.m. today. However, let's just check in on it anyway. So we saw the 2-year yield close up by about 1 basis point, and then you had a touch of buying in the back end. But honestly, not a lot of movement. But I found a catalyst, you guys. Thank you, Barry Knapp. I being me,
Next week, $183 billion worth of Treasury auctions. We get a 2, a 5, and a 7. In fact, you get a 5 and a 2, about $70 billion of each. So maybe that could be a catalyst, particularly as the 2-year yield kind of sits right near that 5% level.
All right, I have no easy segue off of that one, so I'm just going to go for it. This is a great story that caught our attention by our Crystal C. It's about the TikTok video playing and going on about the finance bro stereotype, and it's gone viral. Megan Boney, she is the girl on the couch, in case you haven't heard of her. She posted at the end of April, and basically she was singing about looking for a man in finance, and her video has amassed more than 2 million views, but there's been a meme off of it, and so everybody's been having some fun with it.
Romaine and I know this because a few weeks ago we went to the Brooklyn Mirage together, and it was a rave.
Really? And you guys danced to this?
Yeah, we were just dancing.
Is there
to this.
video proof
We were
of
just
this?
dancing to this all night long.
Were you guys singing along?
That's
I'm
what-
looking for a man in
that's what-
finance,
yeah.
plus fun, 6'5", blue eyes.
And you know, and I've been getting all these weird phone calls ever since. I don't know why.
I'm pretty gullible, so for a hot second, I believe that was true.
You wish it was true.
I was in bed by 9, whatever night I'm talking about.
But the best thing about this is that, so she put that out on TikTok, and then everyone else kind of like built on it, right? Liquidity made it into electronica mix, and then everyone else added their thing to it. They changed the lyrics around a little bit. I mean, I still like the original lyrics, but go have fun with
The
it.
original lyrics, you're not down with the remix.
No, she's not. So literally, I sit across from Scarlett, and like she's been kind of jamming to this all day. So
I've been singing it all day.
Yes.
I got all the other producers involved as well. It's true.
You're not looking, Scarlett, are you?
Well, I don't like the blue eyes. Everything else I'm on board with.
So here's another story, guys, that I feel like we need to talk about. Fruit Loops apparently is going to keep their artificially brightened colors. Some Pop-Tarts, though, you guys, are going to lose them.
Whoa, that is so bright.
that is bright, and that is a lot. So apparently, the snack company Kalanova that makes Pop-Tarts and Rice Krispie Treats is working to replace artificial additives in some of its products with natural alternatives after the dye in them was banned by one state. Can we have Fruit Loops that are boring? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I'm not on board with this. I mean, look at that. That looks delicious.
I mean,
you know what this
double
made me
down.
think about too was you remember those college students that like a couple years ago did a study and found out that all the Fruit Loops are actually the same flavor?
Oh, that sounds about right.
Yeah, they basically said it's all just a ruse. They're different colors, but they're actually the exact
They all
same.
look like Gatorade, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just put enough sugar in it, it's going to taste the same.
It's all in your head.
Wait, did you read down on the story? Breakfast cereal maker Kellogg is keeping the dyes because they haven't yet run afoul of new legal restrictions, even though the company found a way to do these without these colorings for essentially the same product.
I don't know.
The artificial, the dyes, like all this stuff, it's like makes me a little nervous.
I'm sorry.
Also,
if you're eating Fruit Loops for breakfast, I think the dyes are the least of your concern here. Maybe it's like the 1,000 grams of sugar that calcium.
Good thing those GLP-1 drugs are curing pretty much everything.
I'm just saying.
I will say, after a state like California bans some of these things.
Then again, someone in my household
I
actually
think
had
we
ice
know
cream
the
for breakfast
direction
yesterday,
that other states are going to go. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if we started to see more bans across the country.
Well, where California goes, so goes the nation, as it's often said. But, the idea that they're going to tone down the colors. You've got 10-year-old boys who, that's why they wake up. Because they want bright red Fruit Loops.
Wait, are you speaking from experience?
Maybe.
All right. Well, I hope you have Fruit Loops if you want them, or Danish Rounds, or what have you, or
No
not.
thanks. No thanks. Move
We're
on.
looking for a man in finance.
Not doing that. All right. Have a good weekend, guys. A safe weekend, a good holiday weekend. That's our wrap. Our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everybody.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Are we?
I think so.
You're going to throw some Fruit Loops on the grill this weekend for Memorial Day barbecue?
No.
Speaking of the weekend, I think a lot of people are ready for the weekend and ready for the summer. But there are some big issues on the minds of investors. Yes, if and when the Fed will cut rates. What's up with copper prices? Because we've seen some pretty wild swings.
We have.
What else is on their mind?
Yeah, and if we think about copper, we often think of the Chinese economy, the broader question about whether or not that economy is coming back or coming back stronger. We've all kind of been waiting for that. We're also thinking about the next AI play. We're thinking about government debt. I'm doing the laundry list because these are the things that David Weston tackles pretty regularly in his weekly show, Bloomberg Wall Street Week. So let's get to it. David is here with us in studio. Of course, Wall Street Week coming your way at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on radio and TV. It is. Like, I do think about when you guys start the week and the stuff coming at you, and holiday week can be mellow, although we had some things to play with this week.
Well, I'm feeling pretty inadequate because we had Paul Krugman on. He won a Nobel Prize in economics. We did not ask him about Fruit Loops. Not once. It didn't occur
There's
to me.
always
I'm so
next
sorry.
time,
I let
David.
you down, guys.
There is next time. Yeah, please.
We'll have him back.
We'll add it to the list of questions.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have a special segment on Fruit
So
Loops.
when you do have somebody like Paul,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different places you can go because he does write about a lot of different things. Where did you want to go with him?
Yeah, well, one of the things we talked about was U.S. debt, whether it's too big, and we're going to choke on it, and he's not as worried as you might think. We also asked him about interest rates, and he said he was radically confused about interest rates. You know, everybody has a view about whether long-term they're going to be higher or they're going to go back to a lower level. He says, I have no idea. I can make an argument either way. But a lot of what we talked about was the upcoming election and the choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, what that might mean for the economy. And he's concerned, now he is left of center, I think it's fair to say, one would assume from his columns in the New York Times. But he's concerned about Donald Trump specifically on the monetary policy, that he might actually really put pressure on the Fed to try to loosen monetary policy. And this is part of what he had to say, because we had talked to Ken Rogoff earlier, and Ken had said, don't worry about it because the markets won't let him go there. Paul Krugman's not so sure. This is part of what he had to say.
If you look at much smaller countries with that are much more exposed to market pressure, like Turkey, authoritarian leaders have a habit of saying, well, the markets are wrong, and I'm going to order them to stop. You know, you might be surprised at how much socialism, or at least in the sense of capital controls and other things that might happen. You know, if Trump says to the Fed, I want a booming economy, I want you to roll the printing presses, and the markets respond by driving the dollar down and inflation up, he might well then say, well, I'm going to put on rules that stop that from happening rather than changing the policy. Remember, you know, we've had one, you know, since the immediate aftermath of World War II, we've had only one episode of price controls in America, and it was Richard Nixon, not some progressive Democrat who did it. So I think you want to be, I understand Ken's point. He thinks that the bond vigilantes basically would discipline Trump, but I don't think that's a safe bet.
So obviously, Paul Krugman's quite concerned about the possibility of undermining the strength of the dollar with pressure, political pressure coming to bear. And we don't know, I don't know certainly what Donald Trump, if he got a second term, would do. But there are those around him who have been arguing this, including Peter Navarro, as Paul points out, a little indiscreetly here, giving interviews from his jail cell. But Peter Navarro is saying they should fire Jay Powell within the first week. They should get rid of Jay Powell. So there are those around, at least Donald Trump, who are suggesting, there should be a lot of pressure on the Fed.
Wow.
It's really interesting to hear that, especially in the context of that Wall Street Journal story a few weeks ago that kind of talked a little bit about what a Trump administration would like to see from the Federal Reserve. That got a lot of people talking. I don't know if we spoke to you about this, but we did on our program a few weeks ago in the wake of that talk about how he wouldn't be the first president to put pressure on the Federal Reserve.
No, absolutely not. We've seen a fair amount of that. But after there was pressure put on and we got some problems with inflation, as I recall, as a result, it was thought that we really had gotten to a world where we really did recognize that distinction between monetary policy on the one hand and political pressure on the other. But I want to emphasize, the Wall Street Journal did have that report.
Right.
There hasn't been much follow-on to that, really. And for me, at least, consuming it, I don't know whether that's a trial balloon from people, from whether it's Donald Trump or people close to him, or whether it's people around Donald Trump trying to sort of affect the referee, sort of try to push him in a given direction.
I always think, though, you don't want anything that kind of makes countries outside the United States start to question the faith and responsibility of the government, the fiscal situation of the government, the dollar itself in terms of what backs it, right? Because once you start to lose that, then things start to come undone.
Yeah, we've seen that through history in different countries, and it does not end well at all. And I think that's what macroeconomists are uniformly concerned about, that. If you really undermine the dollar, you've got a problem. It's not to say we'll get there, but it's worth considering and thinking about.
Hey, David, we spent a lot of time I would think it's fair to say, Carol, recent months talking about sort of the other AI plays. This idea that it's not just NVIDIA.
Yeah.
And
We talked about this at Milken, right? Like people were talking data centers, energy use.
Utilities?
Like, in a big way, right?
Utilities.
Yeah.
Utilities are like hot again, right?
Yeah.
But what comes with this is a lot of power usage.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of issues when it comes to localities, municipalities, when it comes to these data centers, because people don't necessarily want them in their backyard. But it's also an investment play that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's a lot of burden on the grid. I mean, we already have a lot of challenges as we electrify the entire economy, and now we're going to add this on top of it. We had Christine Todd Whitman on, the former governor of New Jersey, and also former EPA administrator, who has been involved in nuclear power. As she's been advocating nuclear power. But we talked about these small modular reactors, these little things that you can have for one plant. You can have a little nuclear reactor. And her saying that there are a lot of concerns about them, but at the same time, she thinks we should be able to get past them. There are safety engineering issues that can be done, and it's part of the solution.
One of the big concerns, though, is we don't have them yet.
Well, you know, what's funny is we've been talking about it for years.
Yeah.
And there are lots of plans for them, and there are none as far as I asked her that. Have
There's
any
these
been
companies
actually
that are
built?
backed by Bill Gates.
But if you saw, did you see Rolls-Royce just this week announced a deal with a university over in England to create one? So at least they've got a project it looks like they're going to work on. But you know, the regulatory hurdles are really substantial on these things.
United States versus what you see in the rest of the world, whether it's Europe or over in Asia or China, right? Like I think it's just so different in terms of the U.S. environment to have more nuclear capability.
But you said the right word, environment, because one of the things that's always struck me as ironic, if you read, for example, Bill Gates' book, most people who have studied this say we cannot get to zero emissions without nuclear playing some role. It just can't get there. So the environmentalists, ironically, are some of the ones objecting to nuclear, but you can't get there without it.
It does feel like there's been a shift in recent years since the Indian Point closure here in New York, and there are still very few relative to how many there used to be nuclear power plants that still operate in the country. And for many years, folks wanted them closed, and then they realized, wait a second, if these close, we're going to be burning fossil fuels to replace what was a very strong form of clean energy.
Exactly, but there's a long lead time on these things. You don't just turn one on, you don't buy one at your local Walmart and hook it up, you know. It's a long lead time, and you need a substantial capital investment. And given the uncertainties, it's difficult sometimes to raise that capital investment because it takes a long time to build them. You're going to have all kinds of lawsuits, and you don't know.
You covered China a little bit this week.
Yeah, we did.
So got about a minute left.
No, Henry McVeigh, you know, is at KKR. He does this. He goes around the world and he looks at different countries for investments where they have investments. They have substantial, KKR does, in China. And he says it's bottomed out. It's coming back. They're really making an emphasis on industrialization and green. At the same time, they've got to get through the real estate thing fast, and they're not. They're doing it more like Japan than they did like the United States, and they've got to get through that fast. And he's got some specific ideas about how to do that.
Yeah, the longer, I mean, it's dragged on for so long, and they just need to kind of deal with it because that really impacts all of the individuals. Good stuff. You sure there's no Fruit Loops or Cheerios?
We're going to try to work some in just for you. We'll say this is the Carol Master.
I'm going to be listening. We're going to be listening. Have a great broadcast.
Thanks so much.
David, thank you so much. David Weston, of course, host of Bloomberg Business Week, Wall Street Week, excuse me. That's our show.
Are we going to just trading places for the rest of the day?
We're going to switch.
Okay.
Surprise! Wall Street Week with David Weston coming your way at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. David, of course, joining us in studio.
Hey, next up, we've all tapped into Khan Academy, or at least our kids have. Saul Khan is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit, as well as the Khan Lab School. He's got a new book out about AI and education. That's next.
It's 421 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. 5 winning weeks in a row for the S&P 500 index. S&P today up by 36, gain there of just about 0.7%. S&P finishing the week, heading into a long holiday weekend, 53.04 on the S&P. The Dow ending the week well below 40,000, 39,069, up today by 4 points, little change. But again, worth repeating, S&P extends its winning streak to 5 weekly gains in a row. NASDAQ today up 1.1%, also at a record. 10-year yield 4.46%, the 2-year 4.94%. Spot gold up 0.2%, 23.34 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.2%, 77.78 a barrel. Stocks higher today after data showed consumers tempered inflation expectations, bolstering sentiment regarding prospects for Fed rate cuts this year. Boeing says it's teaming up with its largest labor union and the FAA to review safety issues reported by employees. Boeing shares advanced today by 1.3%. Recapping, S&P up 36, up 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Teach your children well. Their fathers have.
Well, our next guest over the last 15 years or so has helped countless students who needed a bit of assistance outside of the classroom with math, economics, physics, history, and more. Maybe it was for a bit of help with AP Calculus in high school, as it was for our producer, Elizabeth Cedrin, or for me, help with understanding accounting principles in business school.
I love it. Everybody is tapped into it. We just had a colleague talk to us about what he is doing and tapping into it, and it's not someone who's like 10 or 12 or 15.
No, he's like downloading the algebra one.
Right? To
which is
refresh.
pretty cool.
Thinking about it. All right, Sal Khan, a familiar name and voice to so many people out there who've seen his YouTube videos. He is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Khan Academy, as well as the Khan Lab School. He's got a new book out, Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education, Why That's a Good Thing. Sal, it is so good to have you here with us. And you know, it's funny, we've been talking a lot about artificial intelligence, as you can imagine. First of all, how are you? Tell us about your world and how things have been.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm great. Things are busy, but busy in a good way. It's exciting. You know, obviously the book just got released. But more of what the book's about is we're living in a science fiction book these days. Khan Academy, a lot of folks know, and it's always great to hear that even people in your own team are benefiting from it or have benefited from it. But it all started with me tutoring my cousin, and everything that we've been doing over the last 20 years since then has been trying to scale up that type of personalization. And what we're now seeing with generative AI, even though there's a lot of issues, a lot of risks, a lot of things to work through, and I try to address that in the book, there's a lot of optimism, or at least I have a lot of hope, that it can do some really positive things, getting us that much closer to giving world-class education to everyone.
Well, it's so interesting, Saul, because when we talk about AI in the classroom, I think a year ago we were talking more about this idea that professors, teachers were so concerned about ChatGPT, for example, being used to write term papers or write essays, and having the software to detect whether or not a GPT wrote an essay. The question about having phones in classrooms, like the idea that technology has helped the classroom is there, but it's also been that technology has hurt the education experience. That's a big part of the conversation right now. How do those two things conflict with one another? How do you see them?
The reality is technology is always it's neutral. It can be positive or negative. You can think of a very simple technology like a knife. It can be used to hurt people. It could be used to cook. It could be used to build things. And we're seeing the same thing with cell phones and with AI, yes. And the cheating is a real issue, and people are still scrambling. And, I have a whole chapter in the book about cheating, and the state of cheating even before AI was actually pretty bad. AI just really put a spotlight on it. Cell phones, social media obviously addict students, especially young people, in a certain way, and most of the literature, it's not good for them. But even before AI, there's really positive things you can do with technology. You can learn on Khan Academy, you can write a paper, you can code, you could edit video. And most of us, I think, as long as it's done in moderation, would be happy if our students spend some time, a few hours a week, doing that type of thing. And so the key is how do you use technology to amplify positive intent, and then how do you also use it to mitigate the negative intent? We're building, and I write about it in the book, we're building tools that not only support students better in their writing, won't do it for them, it'll tutor them, it'll coach them, but it can make that process transparent for teachers. And by doing that, it actually undermines cheating, whether it's AI cheating or other forms.
How does it though, like I think one of the things, the conversations we've been having, Sal, is about kind of this idea of, does it take some of our thinking away from us? Like, you know, sometimes you got to struggle through a concept or a thought or a mathematical problem. Getting an assist can be helpful, but sometimes you got to sit with it for a little bit. And I do wonder about technology taking away some of that work that that we use our brain for. And I'm just a little nervous about that.
It's a valid fear, and you know what I believe is one. In some cases, you do want the shortcut when you're working, et cetera. But in most cases, especially for students, we want them to develop those skills, and that's why everything we've been working on, Conmigo, which is our AI assistant on Khan Academy, it doesn't answer the question. It will push you Socratically. So the other day, I was trying to get it to explain supernovas at a deeper level. I know what they are, but exactly why does it explode? Why doesn't it just collapse? And its response wasn't to just give me a Wikipedia answer or like the type that you'd get on ChatGPT. Its response was, well, can you explain to me what you already know? And then it kept pushing my thinking, well, okay, if that leads to this, well, what do you think would happen there? And so it was a much more Socratic conversation that drives critical thinking. And so there's an opportunity to actually scale that type of learning that's been very hard in the past.
What is your AI tool, like what data are you pulling on for it?
So we are using the underlying frontier models, whether it's, you know, now GPT-4, Turbo, and Omni, et cetera. Yeah. But then on top of that, there's a lot of work to make it really special purpose for education. We're doing a lot of what's called in the trade now prompt engineering, prompt chaining, multiple calls. It's anchored on Khan Academy content that's been vetted by professionals for many years. It can slurp that stuff in as well. So we're putting a lot of the pieces together. We're not just, you know, relying on the raw model, which I don't think is a responsible way to do it for an education use case.
It's still, it is a brave new world that we're living in. Your book's called Brave New Words. Yesterday, Sal, I don't know if you saw this, but a lot of people were posting on X about errors that Google's own AI search tool was making. My brother sent me one about eating rocks, and it actually had cited an Onion article that was joking about eating rocks. But, you know, if you looked at eating rocks on the internet, it said, like, it's recommended to eat rocks every day. And then you look at the source, and it's the Onion. Yeah. So, like, this is not, you know, this is by no means, like, an easy thing to figure out at this point, Sal.
No, not at all. And obviously, I can't defend everything out there. But regardless, obviously the providers are going to work harder to make sure that things like that don't happen. But it's part of digital literacy now for users to recognize that every answer you're going to get from an AI, you're going to have to validate that. You're going to have to put that in context. And not all AIs are considered equal. And this isn't a new phenomenon. Well before generative AI, you could do a web search on Google and very easily click on something that's complete misinformation or see a video on YouTube that's complete misinformation. So we've always had to try to give people that skill of how do they judge, how can they validate. I think that's true in an AI world, and I write a lot about it in the book. There are ways, and we are building these ways, that the AI can not only not do those things, but can help you validate what's real.
Listen, you are someone who was so at the frontier in terms of figuring out a really smart way to use technology to teach kids, and they still do it. I mean, you just think about what you did way back when, right? When it was kind of, I hate to say, like almost simpler times.
The 2008 YouTube, like very early.
It's a while, but it has helped so many and continues to do so. So you, like, not glass half full with AI and this? Like, you think it's going to be okay? You think it's going to be leaps and bounds in terms of teaching folks? Like, I think about tutors. But anyway, like, you are all in. You feel comfortable about this.
Well, what I've told everyone, you know, a lot of people are reading the book. I'm getting interviewed. They're like, hey, you tend to be more optimistic than most people. I was like, no, look, I'm afraid of all of the same stuff that a lot of people are saying. Okay. Bad people are going to use it to amplify bad intent. We're going to see deepfakes. We're going to see fraud. We're going to see state actors try to manipulate people in bad ways. That's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that the good people should just freeze and do nothing. We should use these tools to amplify positive intent. And so what I'm telling everyone, whether AI is a net positive or net negative, isn't like a flip of the coin. We're not just going to like sit and watch. good people should go out there and make the positive use cases happen. We shouldn't just talk about it. And they exist. And we are already seeing that in education. Just earlier this week, we made a big announcement with Microsoft. We're making these teacher tools that are going to save teachers time doing things like lesson planning and grading papers and writing progress reports, saving teachers hours a week. We're making that free, even though it costs a lot of money for the computation, making that free to all U.S. teachers. So there's a lot of good that's already happening. And so I'm optimistic if good people put their energy and the resources behind it, we're going to get a net benefit from the technology.
Hey, Sal, just about 45 seconds left, and then we're going to come back with you and do some more. But as Carol mentioned, you harnessed tech early in your career, 2008 for YouTube. Is AI, in your opinion, more powerful than that?
Oh yeah, I think even if they froze AI today, there's 10 years of amazing things we could create with it. But the reality is the pace of innovation is only accelerating. So yes, what we're going to be able to do in 2, 3, 4, 5 years is going to be mind blowing.
Unbelievable. Yeah. You do think about it. I want to ask you what the AI tutor looks like when we come back. We're going to continue.
There's a chapter in the book about it.
I know.
I love it.
It starts that way. Sal Khan is still going to come back with us. He's founder and CEO, as you know, of the nonprofit Khan Academy, the Khan Lab School. He does have a new book out. It's called Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing. So we'll continue with him in just a moment.
Hey, equity markets were higher on this Friday before Memorial Day. The NASDAQ composite up by 1.1%. The S&P 500 higher by 0.7%. And look at that, Carol. The Dow even finished in the green, up 4 points, 1/100th of 1% higher.
And it looks like we just eked out a little bit of a gain in the S&P 500 for the week overall. So that makes it, I think, 5 in a row.
Hey, let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 Newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is to undergo a medical procedure at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center and will transfer power temporarily to Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks. The Pentagon says the procedure is elective and minimally invasive and is not related to his cancer diagnosis. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has expanded its investigation into Waymo, the autonomous vehicle subsidiary of Alphabet, after more incidents were identified in which the company's cars were involved in collisions or may have violated traffic laws. Investigators say they're concerned that the self-driving vehicle with those unexpected behaviors like crashing into fences and parked cars would increase the risk of crashes and injuries. Waymo did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The top United Nations court has ordered Israel to immediately halt its military operations in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, but stopped short of ordering a full ceasefire. ICJ President Nawaf Salam.
Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate, which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction.
The court ruled Israel must open the Rafah border crossing for humanitarian assistance and submit a report on the measures it's taking to do so within a month. The International Court of Justice judgments are binding. There's no right of appeal, but it does have no mechanism to enforce any order. Israel is unlikely to comply with the order. President Biden may have a new way to help neutralize attacks from the far right about his age. A Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll finds nearly half of swing state voters, 48%, say they trust Vice President Kamala Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if President Biden were no longer able to serve. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. And up Friday, another winning week, 5 in a row for the S&P 500 index. The Dow, a little change today, up 4 points, ending the week, heading into the weekend, 39,069. S&P closing above 5,300, 5,304, up 36, up 0.7%. The NASDAQ Composite Index today up 1.1%. 10-year yield, 4.46%, with a 2-year, 4.94%. Spot gold up $5 the ounce to $23.34, up 0.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.1%, 77.73 a barrel. Tough day for workday after earnings, down the most in 8 years, down 15.3%. Intuit after earnings today, down 8.4%. NVIDIA keeps on going, up another 2.6% to a new record. And with all the focus this week on NVIDIA and AI, Nancy Priall, the co-CEO at Essex Investment Management, told us right here on Bloomberg Business Week, do not overlook the rest of the market.
What we're seeing as a result, though, of all of this excitement over NVIDIA and AI, or I should say AI and then NVIDIA, is that other parts of the market are being crowded out. And we think that is a shame. There are so many really, really tremendous growth opportunities in the market.
Nancy Priall of Essex Investment Management. Again, another record for shares of NVIDIA, now at 1,064, up today by 2.6%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks for that update, Charlie. Do appreciate it. I want to get right back to Sal Khan, a familiar name to so many people. He's the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Khan Academy, as well as the Khan Lab School. He's got a new book out. It's called Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing. Sal, we're going to get back to the book in just a second, but as we were on our planning call this morning, we were talking about Khan Academy, and we were all sharing our experiences with it, and it feels like with you, because those early videos were really you and you only teaching us so much. And we were asking ourselves, is it a nonprofit still? And went up and looked, and it still is a nonprofit. And I'm wondering, talk to us a little about the structure of the organization and why a nonprofit is the right model for you.
Yeah, and it's always good to hear those stories. And I still make a lot of videos. I made a couple this morning.
That's amazing.
There's 3 Harvard Business Schools case studies on Khan Academy, and the question that it normally boils down to is, should Khan Academy be a for-profit or nonprofit? We clearly have a social mission, but we have some of the behaviors or the properties of a high-growth for-profit. We're very tech-focused. We're out here in Silicon Valley. We scale, et cetera, et cetera. For me, it was honestly an emotional decision when I incorporated Khan Academy back in 2008. There were some VCs who were interested, and I'm not against for-profit. My previous life, I was a hedge fund analyst, which was very for-profit. But it felt like education, and it still feels that way, is a space where maybe the markets don't always lead to outcomes that are optimal or outcomes that are aligned with our values. And there were folks even back in 2008 who were using the content, who were telling me how it was changing their life. And I was like, well, I'm not sure if they would be able to access it if they didn't have it. And as a hedge fund analyst, I also saw how you could have a founder who really is mission-driven of a for-profit, but you fast forward 50 years, 100 years, the capital structure changes, the incentives change, and I didn't want that to happen. So I did a kind of delusional thing. I was in this walk-in closet when I filled out the paperwork with the IRS. I said, what if Khan Academy could be like the next Oxford or the next Smithsonian? Even at that time, we had actually served more students than Harvard had in its history, even when I was just one guy in a walk-in closet. And I said, what if we could reach billions? And so it was a little bit of delusional optimism, but it feels less delusional now.
Really interesting. I do want to go back to the book, if we may. Your book, Brave New Words: How AI Will Revolutionize Education, and Why That's a Good Thing. Sal, where do you think AI will have the biggest impact on education? Is it the approach? Is it a certain area? I'm just curious.
The technology is so powerful. I think every hour that you spend brainstorming, you realize it'll have more and more implications. I mean, in any industry, especially education. you know, when OpenAI first reached out to us in summer of 2022, and this was 6 months before ChatGPT came out, and we were able to get early access to GPT-4. Many folks know that even the first ChatGPT wasn't built on GPT-4; it was built on a previous model. We immediately gravitated to, hey, how can this be a tutor for any student? Really do the types of things that I was doing with my cousins 20 years ago. And these frontier models now, like GPT-4, Gemini, et cetera, they really can emulate what a tutor could do via chat. And many folks have probably seen the demo that for Omni, GPT-4 Omni that came out last week. It's me and my son. They brought us in to see if we can do some fun stuff with it. And you can talk to it in a natural way, and it can see your writing, and it can see your face, and it really felt like a live tutoring session. That's all coming. But then there's the other side of the equation. There's what you could do with teachers, helping them write lesson plans, helping be a co-teacher for that teacher, be a teaching assistant, helping them grade papers. That's already happening. We're already getting feedback from school districts using Conmigo that their teachers are saving 5 to 10 hours a week. That's a huge benefit for teachers who are spread thin, who are in many cases overworked. So it's a benefit for them. But I see us going 5 years into the future where it's even able to facilitate interactions between people. A teacher can say, hey, let's do a breakout. The AI says, okay, I'll set up the breakout rooms, and actually I will moderate the conversation at each breakout, and I will bring it back to you, an AI. And this, we have to just be careful that the data privacy and it doesn't get creepy, but an AI can say, hey, we haven't called on Mary in a little while. Why don't we call on her? She looks disengaged, or he looks disengaged. Let's use that to personalize the lessons more. So it really will feel like a teaching assistant.
Hey, Sal, you mentioned Conmigo, and Conmigo is featured prominently in your book. Can you explain what it is and how you guys built it on GPT-4?
Yeah, well, you know, this is back in almost 2 years ago, 18 months ago. We saw there's a lot of potential for the raw technology, but we also said, hey, this could be used for cheating. If you're talking about kids, how do you know that they're not trying to do shady things with the AI? How do you protect their data privacy? How do you make sure that it doesn't make errors in math and hallucinate? And so we said, there's a lot of work here to take this raw AI model and make it appropriate for schools. So our AI tool set for teachers and students, we call Conmigo. And it does that's what it's doing. It won't cheat. It will work with you Socratically. It'll actually help undermine other forms of cheating, even AI-based cheating. It makes everything transparent to the teacher. It'll actively notify parents and teachers if students try to do something shady with the AI. We're introducing interfaces. Not everything should be a chat interface. We're doing interfaces where a student can write an essay, co-create a document. Once again, all of that is transparent to the teacher. The AI can highlight parts of the document and give students feedback on it. We've created activities where it can act as a bit of a career and guidance counselor for a teacher, for a student. Once again, not to replace the human beings in their life, but really to amplify that impact. Whenever a student needs it, it's there. And then when they get with the teacher or their guidance counselor, they can go deeper.
Hey, listen, one thing we talk about a lot, Sal, as you would imagine, is college admissions. And you have a chapter towards the end of the book devoted to that. The first line in it says, the classic components considered in college admissions are grades, standardized tests, extracurriculars, essays, and letters of recommendation. AI will change how most, if not all, of these factors are valued, developed, and evaluated. Those are your words. What impact will it have on that process?
It is really across the board. As we know, these things are all about writing. And what we do also know is, you know, there was the Varsity Blues scandal several years ago where we saw these corrupt coaches, admissions coaches that you could hire to almost fabricate a college admissions. But what we know, you know, in especially places like Silicon Valley where I live, New York, a lot of affluent people, upper middle class people, well before AI, they were paying $400. It's still happening, paying $400 or $500 an hour to have these professionals advise their kids on how to maximize their essays, et cetera. Now, the ethical ones are just act as coaches, but it's still a huge advantage. And the less ethical ones are essentially writing these essays. And, you know, I think admissions officers, and I write about this in the book, they've kind of known about this, but they've kind of intentionally not wanted to address the elephant in the room about the inequity. And to the fact that the AIs can now do some of this work for all students, it really just puts a spotlight on something that's always there. And it makes you wonder whether you can get richer points of data for a student than a recommendation, than an essay. But that's where the AI could be interesting too. future admissions SAT type things could have free response. You could have to talk things through. You could write it out, and then the AI could make sense of that.
So cool. There's also a chapter about employment in an AI world. There's so much in this book. Sal, thank you for finding time for us to talk about. Sal Khan, of course, his new book, Brave New Words.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The summer travel season kicking off this weekend. It is getaway day for a lot of people hitting the road, taking trains or planes to get away for a long holiday weekend. Airlines are balancing resilient consumer demand with ongoing fleet challenges. A Bloomberg analysis found U.S. airlines are adding seats at the slowest pace since the pandemic. Elaine Becker with TD Cowen says, yes, expect long lines and recommends planning for weather if you're traveling by air.
And I see this every summer because of thunderstorms and because you never really know when they're going to pop up. If you can take the earliest flight of the day, that is your best bet.
And Helene Becker with TD Cowen expects travel demand to remain strong for the entire summer. Turned out to be a mixed day for a lot of the airline stocks. UAL, little change today, down 3 cents. American, up 2 cents, up just about 0.1%. Delta up by 1.2%. Southwest up 0.7%. But JetBlue declined now at $5.45. JetBlue today down by 2.7%. Boeing says it is teaming up with its largest labor union and the FAA to review safety issues reported by employees, all part of a broader effort to address concerns about the company's safety culture. Boeing shares up today by 1.3%. 3%. Sources say Alphabet's Google will invest about $350 million in Flipkart, an Indian online retailer that is controlled by Walmart. And those are some of our top company stories at this hour. On an update for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a look at our top company stories.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Tim, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is to undergo a medical procedure at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center this evening, and he is to transfer power temporarily to Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks. The Pentagon says the procedure is elective and minimally invasive and is not related to his cancer diagnosis. Vice President Kamala Harris is increasingly endearing herself to swing state voters, which just might help President Biden with Republican attacks regarding his age. A Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll finds nearly half of swing state voters, 48%, say they trust Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if Biden were no longer able to serve. The poll finds Donald Trump leads President Biden 48 to 44% across the 7 swing states. They're tied in Nevada. Donald Trump says Nikki Haley will be on his team, quote, in some form if he wins the White House. Trump suggested to News 12 in New York after a rally yesterday that he would offer Haley a position in his administration if he wins.
Well, I think she's going to be on our team because we have a lot of the same ideas, same thoughts. I appreciated what she said. You know, we had a nasty campaign. It was pretty nasty, but she's a very capable person, and I'm sure she's going to be on our team in some form.
After a bitter campaign during which Haley called Trump unhinged and not fit to be president, Haley this week told the conservative think tank, the Hudson Institute, that she would be voting for Trump. And we are learning that Blackstone CEO Steve Schwartzman is to support and donate to Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election as well. Meanwhile, Trump says if he's elected in his first week in office, he will end Manhattan's congestion pricing. He calls it a disaster. He made the commitment, or rather the comment, in a post on Truth Social, claiming to have stopped it on the federal level when he was president. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Back to Bloomberg Business Week now with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec.
All right, Amy, thank you so much. Have a great holiday weekend. Having said that, Amy talked about what is the most read story on the Bloomberg in the past 60 minutes, and this has to do with Blackstone CEO Steve Schwartzman saying he will raise money for Donald Trump's campaign, handing the presumptive Republican nominee a major win as he builds his donor base. So, yeah, that's a big one.
The billionaire private equity chief and heavyweight political donor has long been a major source of funding for Republicans, but he's kept mum for months over whether he will back Trump. Axios first reported this a little earlier today, and it's a reversal for Steve Schwartzman, who said in 2022 that he would not back Trump again, calling for a new generation of Republican leaders.
All right. So, but I guess as you get closer to the race, maybe, your thinking or whatever changes, if you will. But nonetheless, it's the most read story on the Bloomberg terminal. So a lot more commentary there. Just real quickly before we go, another one of the most read stories. This is why we love most read. It's actually a story from the Wall Street Journal. And the Home Alone house is back on the market after 12 years. Yeah.
Guess how much it's going to cost?
I have no idea.
$5.25 million is the asking price. A hefty markup, according to the Wall Street Journal, from the $1.6 million that the owners paid for it only back in 2012. That's according to property records, though it has been renovated. And even though it's been renovated, there are still some elements that were originally in the home.
They did a major renovation 4 years after buying it, finishing and expanding the basement, adding a home theater and sports court, also reconfigured parts of the house, including a screened-in porch with a two-sided fireplace. But they made sure to leave features that were prominently featured in the film, such as the front door and the central staircase where Kevin goes sledding. That was in the movie. It's a classic. We didn't want to take that out or touch it in any way. Anyway.
Winnetka, if you're in the market for a house in Winnetka, the Home Alone house is available.
If you're in the market for a great podcast or broadcast, check out Bloomberg Business Week.